So how do we do it? What does it mean to build our tower in God's kingdom? What does it mean to give all that we have to build for Him? Well, the answer is pretty simple, and it's kind of a dirty word in some respects. Obey. Obviously, there's a little bit more to it than that, but in many ways, that's it. It's a very all-encompassing word, but it's something that really makes us recoil if we've had bad experiences. But Jesus says, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock of obedience, of Jesus. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. I read a story about a department store in Seoul, South Korea in 1995 called the Sampoong Shopping Mall. Now it was a major fiasco. Partway through the building, the executives decided to change the purpose of the building. So they made some pretty major changes that went against the way that the architect had designed the building to stand. They took out some supports to put in escalators. They moved some support columns around, just did a lot of things. They added a 5th floor right at the end. It was only designed to have 4 floors. Well, over time, this building started to crack, started to leak. And they were warned again and again, hey, we've got to figure this out. We've got to check this out. You've got to get people out of here. But they ignored them. The executives of this company ignored all the warnings. They ignored all the rules, the way that they were supposed to build this building. And they even ignored the warning signs at the end. Well, one day, you can imagine the ending. One day, this building collapsed during the middle of a business day and killed over 500 people. It was the biggest non-wartime calamity or cause of death in Korea in history. You can see where I'm going with this, right? We buck against the idea of obedience sometimes, not realizing that in many ways, we have to obey the rules of life. If we believe that Jesus is the one who gave us our life, then surely He has the keys to how life is supposed to be. He knows what fullness of life is for us. And so when He tells us to do something, it's probably for our life. See, part of the problem is we all have bad experiences with bad rulers or bad authorities. Maybe it's been a really tough or maybe abusive parent. Maybe it's been a kind of a harsh, strict school that you went to, or a really unhealthy form of church or an institution, or a bad relationship. And maybe obedience to those things or those people or those structures caused a lot of damage to you. And that's legitimate. It makes sense that sometimes we have an aversion to the idea of obeying authorities. But the problem is not obedience. The problem is we have to obey and we have to follow a good king, a good ruler and authority. Because a good king, a good ruler, gives us orders, gives us commands, gives us rules for our life. Not because they want something from us, but because they want something for us. And this is the way with God's kingdom. right? If Jesus came that we may have life abundantly, naturally he knows what it takes to get it. He is a good king. He wants life for you. There are not rules in this book just to appease God. He's not telling us to take trips or just to give money or do these things or do these rituals, say this prayer 5 times a day. He's not commanding us things like that to satisfy Him. Sometimes He tells us things that we don't understand to shape our own hearts. But everything that He tells us is for our good, for our life. And when we buck against that, it's to our own pain, it's to our own detriment. So it's important to look and see, what is this Jesus, what is this God telling us to do? Now there's a lot, and I want you to study this Jesus, study what He's telling us to do, what He commands us. He sums everything up by saying the greatest 2 commandments are love the Lord your God with all of your heart and your mind, your soul, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the summary. That does not sound like a harsh rule that's hard and laborious to keep. It is hard, but it's life-giving and it is worth it. In the Gospel of John, chapter 15, this is kind of long, but Jesus is telling us what this relationship of obedience is like. He says, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me." Abide means to live and stay and get life from Him. "I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like the branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide, live, rest, get your life from my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be full in you, that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. The commandments of Jesus are not burdensome. They are for our life. The commandments that He gives are the ways that He shapes us in love. How does that make you feel? How do you feel about that when we say to obey? Be honest with yourself. What's your first thought when you hear that the tower of your life, built in God's kingdom, is built from the bricks of obedience? How does that feel? It's okay if it's a little hard to swallow. But if we're following this Jesus, if we're following this King, it's impossible to get around. This is what He's calling us to. But see, obedience isn't just about our personal morality. So often we get mixed up. We confuse it with just trying to make ourselves better, not doing this, not being jerks, being a nice guy. But Jesus calls us to so much more than that. right? In the world, we hear we need to not be racist, not be sexist, not be chauvinist, and of course, all of those things. But Jesus doesn't want you just to not be racist. Jesus doesn't want you just to not be a jerk. He calls us to something higher, something greater, something all-encompassing. He calls us to love. And if we obey that, everything else will be taken care of. Because remember, His love, the love that we're obeying, is a giving, powerful love. See, obedience is not merely about your personal morality. It's the way that Jesus brings healing, reconciliation, redemption to the world. It's not about just not doing bad things. And I don't know about you, but when I hear that I have to obey that kind of love, that's liberating, that's exciting. This is something that we get to do. If we're asking, what do I have to do to follow Jesus? We're asking the wrong question. The question is, once I'm brought into Jesus' kingdom, what do I get to do? How do I get to be His hands and feet? Now, we have to be careful here, right? What I'm not saying is that we earn Jesus' acceptance or approval by obedience. The fact is, Jesus has no prerequisites to laying down our lives to Him, to laying down our rebellion to Him and being made His children. We are made God's children by what we call repentance, by turning away, taking our lives from out of our own hands and giving them to God. That's how we're made accepted Him. We don't earn that. But once we are in His kingdom, once we are His children, His people, His servants, we have an amazing job, an amazing role to play. And that is to be, as the Bible says, the hands and feet of Jesus. Jesus says, love as I have loved, serve as I served, work as I have worked. We get to do the works of the kingdom that bring life for us, through us, and in the lives of those around us. We get to do that through obedience. You see, to lay down the ownership of our lives, to take up our crosses, to renounce all that we have, all these things find their life in obedience. Obedience is the very heart of what it means to give our lives to Jesus. Obedience is the very blood of the life that He gave for us and promises to give to us and through us. So I encourage you, don't buck when we say to obey God, obey the Lord. Because it's through that obedience that you will experience His love, that you will experience His life, and also live it out. So I encourage you to start by reading the words of Jesus in the New Testament. Start in the 4 Gospels, and then move on to the epistles. Look at what this King is commanding you to do. Process those things. Dig deep into the heart of the reason for those commandments, what He's commanding, and see where He is looking for life for you in them. This is a process. This is not an easy one-day thing. When we're laying down our lives for Him, it's a daily, everyday thing, seeking Him, learning from Him, growing in Him, growing in obedience to this good King and these good commands. So I encourage you to start there. Learn from Jesus what He wants you to do. Spend time in prayer with Him, just being honest, honestly talking to Him, asking Him questions, listening for His voice. He'll speak to you. He will lead you.